Hi, I'm Wayne from CG Obsession, and today I'd like to go through with you 12 brushes in ZBrush that should consider using. This is just my personal opinion. A lot of people use different brushes or have different techniques, but I think the main thing you need to identify is some brushes are great for hard surface modeling and some brushes are great for organic modeling. So depending on the brush you use, they'll have different strengths. The first brush we'll look at is the clay build-up brush. So I've already got it selected here. We've turned the intensity down and I've given it a little bit higher. So basically what a lot of people use the clay build-up brush for is just to create some forms and a little bit of detail. So for instance in this model here, if we wanted to build up like a bit of a ridge on the eyebrows, redefine the nose, that kind of thing, this is what this brush is great for. So we could kind of like just change the nose altogether, give it a little bit more of a ridge on this eyebrow here. And as you can see, you could easily start changing this head. Not the best art, but it proves what I'm trying to say here. So the next point is, next brush is the damn standard brush. So this brush is good for creating a lot of fine detail or like kind of just defining a little bit of edges. So we'll just select it. So it's under damn standard. So we'll turn our draw size down. And basically what it's good for is stuff like around the lips where you usually have that little drop off here. So what we can use it for, if we use it, just light touch, undo, undo, and hold control so we're not inverting it, we're extruding it, not the mask. Oh, maybe turn the intensity down as well. As you can see, you can kind of like just define a little bit more the mouth, or it's good for like kind of wrinkles. You get the point. But it's just great for like kind of defining those little details that you can't usually do in other forms. As you can see, if you do it, it's just kind of a nice straight stroke, or you can invert it and it can just be a nice straight stroke going that way. So really useful brush. Take my word for it, even though my example isn't the best. The next one is the move brush. So what this brush is good for is all kinds of things, and I'm sure at some stage you've probably used it. So I use this brush to kind of just change the general layout of things. So for example, this ear here. So if we have a look, say we've sculpted this ear, it looks really good, but the only problem is you just want it to kind of sit out on the head or sit back on the head or whatever kind of orientation you want the ear. So we'd use the move brush and simply just move the brush in. So if we wanted to make it sit on the side of the head a bit more, we could do that. Um, just a few light touches, and as you see, it kind of easily changes the model without changing a lot of the detail. The next brush, the Inflate brush. I use this brush a lot for kind of just to give things a lot more volume. So for instance, if you've got drawn a hand and you need to give like fingers a little bit more volume, it's good for kind of just giving it obviously that little bit of volume. So you can find the Inflate brush here. So in this case, I'll just use it on the nose of our model. So if we just scale it down, and you can kind of use it here. So as you can see, it's already giving us a little bit of variation, and you can kind of just use it to just give things a little bit more volume. It's a really useful brush, and I'd encourage you to use it. I use it quite a lot, especially for organic modeling, and yeah, you can get some interesting results without having to like do those harsh clay build-up type strokes, and you can get results really quickly. The fifth brush, the snake hook brush. Now, so historically, this brush hasn't been the best for. It's okay, but it's not been the best because you're usually limited by the amount of topology that you have. Because what it does is it basically takes whatever it is and drags out all the topology here. So we'll just use this as an example. As you see, as we're running into topology, we're getting these weird artifacts because if you have a look at the mesh here, we're starting to extrude tries here that it's just not supporting that kind of geometry. So one cool thing that's been introduced into, I think it was 2018 ZBrush, is Sculptress. So if you hit this and then select your snakehook brush, you can actually do a lot more. So what Sculptress does is it basically generates the geometry and topology as you're actually sculpting. So there's no reason for you to have to then go in Dynamesh, smooth it out, and then continue extruding. So what we can do here is, for instance, on the head, we can drag it out. And as you can see, it kind of very much similar to how the move brush works, but you have a lot more freedom because you can create topology and I mean a little bit more geometry. So the bigger the brush is, the bigger the tries are. The smaller the brush is, the smaller tries are. So if we now then go a little lower and then kind of move it out, you'll see it's getting a little bit more fine, but it's a lot different to what we were getting with the without Sculptress on. So if we just drag it out now, we're not getting those weird artifacts. It's actually just creating the topology needed to support that geometry. So it's actually quite a good brush, and you can actually do a lot of cool things with it. IMM brushes. So this is your insert multi-mesh brushes. With ZBrush, you get a whole array of them here. So you get anything from machine parts to different body parts, all the cool things that you can find here. You can get user-made ones, so people actually sell them online, or you can go in and just find some free ones that people are happy to share with you. Just as an example, we'll use this IMM toon brush. So let's just give him a new nose. So we'll use this base nose here, and basically I'll turn symmetry off because that will look terrible. So we'll just drag out a nose. As you can see, the topology, geometry isn't touching here, so that can be a little bit concerning, but we just put it in there like that. And as you can see, we've more or less given him a new nose once we get it around the right way. So, good thing about this, you can really kind of almost exclusively use these brushes. So if you had a large library of them, you could, in theory, put together a model made purely of these, which is kind of the intention of this one here. So you can iterate really quickly, do the little changes that you need, and one thing I will show you is at the moment it's got separate topology. So what you can do is then, once you're happy with how it looks, take off a mask, and then we'll just Dynamesh it. Just hit up to 512 for now. And hit Dynamesh. And as you can see, we've now welded the topology together. So there's no hidden geometry underneath here. It's all just one piece and then a solid piece of mesh. Yeah, so you can kind of just add things onto it, then go and Dynamesh it, and you can get this kind of result. It's actually really cool what you can do with them. The smooth brush. So this one's an obvious one, but the one trap a lot of people fall into is they do rely on the smooth brush a lot. So for instance, if you're going along using the clay buildup brush, and then, I mean, you end up with, we'll turn Sculptress off. That's one thing you can also try with the clay buildup brush is Sculptress does give different results. You can see it's a lot more fine here. So if you look in here, it's created no geometry instead of just going over the existing one. So anyway, we can create this effect here. We'll just turn this off because it's not exactly showing the best result. And yeah, so as you're building, a lot of people go in and then you can just go along and smooth to get the result. But as you can see, it kind of gives a very smooth, it doesn't look the best. So I would go through, do all your main form changes, and then at the end just do a light smooth over. And if possible, if you haven't gone into too high density of a mesh, it's better because it has a better effect. At the moment, if you're using this, it's purely just smoothing based on the kind of geometry that you have. But one thing you can do is, once again with the Sculptress brush, if you turn this on, now it'll smooth based on your brush size. So you can actually smooth off a lot of detail. So for instance, uh, prior to this, if we tried to smooth this out, for instance, see how it has really no effect and it takes a while. If we turn Sculptress on, you can now almost instantly smooth that out, because it basically just smooths it out, gives it new topology, and yeah, it's quite useful if you know how to use it. And yeah, now we have a very lopsided, crazy nosed man. So the trim brushes. So I personally like organic modeling a lot more, and a lot of people steer away from it when they're using it in ZBrush, but I actually think it's a lot better in ZBrush than in traditional programs such as Blender. So what I like doing with the trim brushes, so I'll just show you a quick sphere. So we'll put the sphere in. So um, so basically what the trim brushes do is, just pick trim curve for now, is it cuts through the mesh, outside, and as you can see, it's created a whole new lot of topology here. So it's a really clean cut, and you have the topology. There's no weird artifacts, which I'll show you in a second with the clip brushes. The main downside is here that you can't actually use this brush in symmetry. So if you like the cut that you did, you then have to go into something like mirror and weld, and then you can mirror and weld if you actually had it on the right axis. You can mirror and weld it to the other side depending on what kind of result you're looking for. So while it doesn't have symmetry, it's certainly not limited. And then you have all the other choices. So you have like the eclipse circle, not that one. We want clip circle, trim circle. Sorry. There it is. So you got your trim circle, trim rectangle. They give varying results. As you can see, like for instance here, it didn't give it a clean cut around. So you really got to experiment. I find working at different densities in your mesh helps this result. So a low density, I think typically gives you a better curve, whereas a high one it tries to create the geometry and topology that you need, but sometimes it fails. So it's really just a matter of playing around. But this brush is really good for stuff like hard surface modeling, because you can get really just a uniform, precise cut in the mesh. So the next brush I'll draw your attention to is the clip brushes. So they function pretty similar to the trim brushes, um, except for the fact that they actually do work in symmetry. So I'll show an example here. So I've trimmed it, and the other thing that they do is they don't actually get rid of the old topology and replace it with new. What it does is it just rearranges the topology, and in a way that it makes the cut. The one thing that you will find may happen is if you are kind of in a high density, or sometimes in general, when you use a clip brush, I'll see if I can recreate it here. That's obviously not what I'm going for. You eventually end up with weird artifacts that extrude out. Of course, it doesn't do it when I'm trying to do it. There we go. So yeah, it still has the same amount of quads that it originally had, but now because it can't really place them anywhere, it's just kind of randomly placed them here. So when you use this brush, I recommend you just kind of just do a cursory check to make sure it's done what you expected it to do. But in general, it's a useful brush to use, and if you're trying to decide which brush you should be using, I'd recommend just trying both, see which one gives you the best results for what you're trying to do. The next one is the H polish brush. So a lot of people use this brush, and I find it particularly useful for hard surface because it kind of gives that smooth finish that a lot of brushes don't. So we'll just find it here, H polish. Okay, so basically what it does is it uses the geometry around it and kind of just smooths out the top layer. So we'll just do it here. So as you can see, oh, hold on, we'll take Sculptress off. Turn the intensity up just a smidge. As you can see, it's given us a very flat look. And the more we do it, the flatter it becomes. And you can kind of facet it. So, for instance, if you're making like an armor plate or something like that, you can kind of facet it so it kind of looks like it's just that rough, metally kind of look instead of the typical look you get if you just like use a clay build-up brush or something like that. Um, really useful. Maybe turn up the density and try it. So I just subdivided it there, and you can see it's giving us a lot more of a facet. I encourage you to try around with this. It is a really good brush, especially if you're into hard surface, but you can still use it for organic. I mean, there's always uses for it, and especially if you want this kind of result. But I mean, it's a great brush to use. The pinch brush. So this brush is good for both hard surface and for organic. So I'll just demonstrate what it does. So basically, it just pulls two pieces of geometry that are on different angles together to kind of give it that pinched look, as you'd expect from the name. So what it does is, we'll just turn it down. So for instance, we've now H polished this, and we just want to accentuate like these harder parts here. A pinch brush is great for that. You can kind of go through, and it's just kind of giving it a more like stronger feel. It's just pulling it together. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uses you can use it for. The other one I found is actually really useful is for kind of like creases in cloth. So what I'd normally do is I get the damn standard brush, for instance, and I just make it decent enough. Start again. Turn the intensity up a little bit, and I just make a kind of crease in it there, and then we grab our pinch brush, and you can kind of just pinch the edges around certain parts to kind of give it that clothy kind of feel. So if you had a few of these in a row under an arm or something like that, you can kind of give it just that, uneven look. It's not just a straight indent into your mesh. You can kind of just style it to make it look like a crease more so than you would if you just use the damn standard brush on its own. So I encourage you to play around with it. It's a really good brush, and it'll save you a lot of time. And yeah. So the final brush I want to go through is the ZModeler brush. So this brush isn't really per se a brush. I'd say it's more of a tool, but as you can see, it's in our brush menu, so I've included it in this list. So what the ZModeler brush does is it's basically a box modeling tool. So anything like Blender or your traditional programs use a lot of box modeling, and ZBrush isn't alone. You can actually do that as well. So what we can go to here, we'll go initialize, and we'll just reinitialize this sphere into a cube. I'll make polymesh 3D to a cube, and as you can see here, I recommend turning on your frame here. And yeah, so as you can see, we have squares, the faces, we have edges, and we have points. So with the ZModeler brush, you can quickly create some weird shapes. As you can see, it kind of connects it as you drag it out over other topology here. So you can create some weird shapes. The cool thing is you can then go and press space, and basically all these options here are options that you can use to help with your box modeling. So this is why I really like box modeling in ZBrush, because you have a lot of stuff that you can do. A lot of the other programs don't give you this choice, and you're literally just box modeling, putting welding points together, and it can be quite difficult. This does have a little bit of a learning curve, but I think if you get the hang of it, you can save a lot of time switching between programs for your box modeling needs. The other cool thing is you can then go to an edge, and you can perform all these different things on your edge. You can perform it based on polygroups. You can do all kinds of cool things to kind of streamline your process in your box modeling, because it can be quite a tedious task. And once again, you can go to the points and select, like you can stitch points together, you can delete points, you can do all kinds of things. So really anything you can do in Blender, you can do in here. And in my opinion, you can do it a lot quicker if you get good at it. Um, yeah, so highly recommend this. It's great for organic, like blocking out the initial shape and then um, subdividing it and then sculpting on it, or as you could imagine, really good for hard surface modeling. So that's the 13 brushes. I hope you got something out of this, and thanks for your attention.